Good evening, everybody. Katrina Ellis here from Financial Wellness Academy. So, tonight's call is going to be a catch up call, and we're just going to summarize the main points that we had during the sessions during the week. So, for those of you who didn't get a chance to attend, this is a great time now to just catch up on what we were the main pieces that we got from the session. So, I hope to keep this to max half an hour, hopefully a little bit less, depending on how we get through the information. So to start with, I'll cover the key points out of Monday's call. And on Monday, we discussed the main thing really was around understanding what financial wellness means to you. And whilst this may seem a very simplistic step and something really simple to do, it is actually, there's very good reasons for doing that. And it's a very powerful step, albeit a very simple one. So it's worth taking a little bit of time, and how you take that is really up to you. Whether you like to do, a little meditation to get you into that space to create an idea as to what that looks like for you, or whether it's going on a quiet walk or going for a swim or whatever it is that gets you into a state where everything's peaceful and calm, and you have some time and space to actually think about what that would look like. And the most powerful way I find to do this is to do it and incorporate your five senses. So really bringing in to the process as you envision this as to what would you see, what you hear, feel, touch, taste, smell in that time. And I walk myself through, when I do it, I try to do it at least twice a year. And I walk myself through a typical day, in where I would be my ideal level of financial wellness, from the moment I open my eyes to the moment I close my eyes, and everything that happens in between. And I find that personally a really good way. For me, the best way that works is to do a guided meditation, and I have a mentor who walks me through that, and that's really powerful because each time I do it, there are two main benefits as I see. It provides a very clear endpoint as to what it is that you're trying to create. And when you have clarity on that, it makes it much easier to navigate, because if you've no idea where you're going, it's going to make the decisions en route quite difficult. And it's also going to make you've no idea whether you've arrived or not. So having that clarity, and it doesn't have to be minutia of detail on it, just a really good idea, a good feel for what it would look like. What would be the key pieces that would be there? Who would be around? Where would you be? What are the kind of things you would be doing? And that really starts to shape up then that gap between where you are and where you want to be, and what are the decisions that you need to make along that path to get you where you want to be. And the other important piece around this is really to understand that it's not essential that that you can't lock that endpoint that you're envisioning is not set in stone. So when you arrive at that, or you're most of the way there, and you do the process again, that is a moving feast. So I have changed mine several times, and that's absolutely fine. There's no downside to that. So it is really just go through the process and have a sense of trust. If you don't quite get right now as to the importance of this, take my word for it. I've done it. I've been doing this now for 7, 8 years, and it's a key part of it. So take yourself through it. The picture you see in the slide is part of my financial wellness vision. This is the little town that we live in, somewhere that just lights me up every time I drive back into it or come back to it after I've been away. It really makes me smile. We can see the harbour from our window, and it's something I've always wanted to be beside water. And when I did this process or experience, or did this visioning exercise back in 2015, I really wanted to be beside water. But at the time, I was in a landlocked county in the middle of Ireland. So it really, I had no idea as to how it was going to happen. And that's the important one thing to note as well. in that a lot of people will limit themselves from what they really want because they think, look, how on earth is that going to happen? Put the how to side, and forget about it for now. Just it's blank sheet and it's whatever you would really like. And surprisingly, or not unsurprisingly, a lot of clients that I work with have really simple visions, and they don't involve private jets or yachts or personal chef or anything hugely different from the life they have now, which is a great place to be. But there's small, slight changes, and that's fine too. But if you want the private yacht and the private jet and all that too, then that's good as well. And there's definitely elements of that in my vision at the moment, and some of them are starting to come to fruition. And over the years, that has changed and up leveled each time. So there's no right or wrong. You can't get this wrong. It's personal to you, and just give it a go. Allocate a small chunk of time, whenever, maybe tonight before you go to bed, or if morning time is better for you, then see sometime during the week as to when you could potentially get some time to allocate towards giving this a little bit of thought. And whether, if you're very visual and you like to draw, maybe it's about sketching it out, or maybe it's writing it out. Whatever modality works best for you, engage that. There's no right or wrong way to do this. The What you want is the end goal. You want a really clear picture in your head as to what that looks like for you. Okay. So I want to give you a little bit of background on where I've come from. So if you haven't come across me before, to give you an idea as to why I'm doing this, and give you an idea as to why this is something, that I'm qualified, I guess, to talk about. So I lived in Ireland in 2015, and I was definitely in a place of financial desperation at that time. I lived in this beautiful house. So from the outside, lots of people might have thought, wow, what a beautiful home. And it all looked like we had all the trimmings on the outside, but inside we had three small kids. So I personally was very sleep deprived and really struggling with the massive learning curve and steep curve of parenthood times three. And we had two 100% mortgages on this house and another house in Dublin, which we had rented out at the time. And what the money that we had, one income, and the money that was coming in was going out. There was nothing left at the end of the month. And if we had the extra bill come in during that month for car insurance or tax or whatever, it would tip us over the edge, and we always had to scramble to figure out how do we fix that, how do we deal with that. So it really felt like a very stressful place. It was anxiety ridden, and the future. When I looked forward with the kids, I thought, what are we going to be able to do for them? And when they're small, my opinion is that their needs are fairly basic, and everything that they had at that time, everything, all the important things. I was home full time with them. They had a beautiful safe space to grow up in, and they were warm and clothed and fed, and that was the extent of largely their needs. But as they got older, those needs are obviously going to change. And so I was looking forward, thinking, how are we going to provide for them, to any decent level of based on their needs at their older ages. And it felt really grim and depressing sitting where we were, to think that, oh, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do this. But it was a turning point in 2015. Two of my kids have birthdays in October, and we were having a birthday party for them and getting ready for that party with family and friends at our house. And two letters dropped on the in the postbox. They were both from the bank, advising us that each mortgage, this one and the one in Dublin, had gone up by 0.5%. There was no ECB increase. It was purely the bank trying to recover losses from the crash earlier. And so there was nothing to stop them doing this again and again. And this, we probably could absorb that current 0.5% increase. But my fear was, well, if they do it again and again, then what? How do we cope then with just one income and the level of expenses we have? So something kind of snapped, I think, in me, and the pain was so intense of all those thoughts in my head that I realized something had to change. And what changed was my decision that the future was going to be different. It was not going to continue to play out as it currently was, because that was not an option. So I started looking around and I came across somebody's newsletter I was on was recommending a particular individual to me. I checked her out. I bought her book, really loved her book, read it a few times, then did one of her small programs, and then did her high end program. And the learnings that I got from that, I applied everything I learned that was appropriate to my situation. And I took a lot of action. And very slowly but surely, things started to change quite considerably. And it was actually at the back end of 2015 that we moved to the Isle of Man. And the picture I showed you previously is where we live now. And it was that journey, and I'm not saying that you need to move country to, get your financial wellness where you need to be, but it may be something you need to consider. Who knows? But that was something that was necessary for us. And that was a decision we were happy to make. Moving country, whilst the gross income didn't change, the take-home income instantly did because of the significantly lower tax rate here. And that then allowed us to have spare money, and we started to slowly but surely put money savings away in investments, etc. And that at one point got up to 50% for quite some time. So we were putting 50% of everything that was coming into the house away. And so the balance started to tip very much back in our favor. And we really started to have a good sense of financial wellness. Then 2020 hit, and our only income for my husband as an airline pilot was wiped out. So obviously the travel industry was one of the industries quite severely affected, and our only income was gone. Now, thankfully, because we'd spent the previous 5 years getting savings, etc., in place, we weren't losing sleep about paying the mortgage, paying the bills, putting food on the table. None of those things were a concern, but a massive concern was, when are we going to get this income back? And massive learning, we've just had one income, so we need to add some more. So my husband was focused on his job and getting that sorted, and subsequently he had to move away for 6-9 months to work, and then he lost his job. The company went bust. He was lucky enough to get a new one, but he had to take a 40% pay cut to get that job. So there was a lot of flux in that period. Also in that period, I decided I wasn't gonna ever put all our eggs in one basket with one source of income. I had spent the previous years home full time with my kids, home educating them, because that was part of our vision of financial wellness. But they were now at the age where I could probably take some time and start to jump back in the working seat. Because prior to that, to having kids, I was in retail banking. I was a qualified financial advisor. I'd come from a business background in university. And that was something I really enjoyed, but wanted to be home when the kids were born. So now back in 2020, and I'm thinking, okay, what can we do? So I spent the last 2.5 years or so adding a number of streams of income. I think we're up to about maybe 6 or 7 now. I'm sitting in one of them, which is an area we converted in our house to an Airbnb place. It was a dumping ground at the time. It was a garage and a storeroom, and it's now been converted. So it's added value to our house, and it allows us to rent it out and contribute towards paying our mortgage. And hopefully, when we get it to the occupancy rate we want, it will actually cover our mortgage every month. So, that's one of the things. Some of the other things that I was working on was buying buy to lets in the northeast of England. So we bought 6 in a 12-month period. Having never left the island, never seen them, we did all our due diligence remotely, and lots of people would say that that was absolutely bananas, but it worked for us, and we're very happy with them, and they're providing a really steady income every month. So there was a lot of action in those 2.5 years to again remove that pain, and it was pain again that was caused in 2020 by that income disappearing, and me again feeling really intensely, right, that this is never going to happen again. Okay, so I suppose it's easy to say, for me to say to you, don't wait until you get to the really painful point that you are potentially maybe incapacitated with the weight of it, because it took me 10 days to actually gather my thoughts. It was like a sucker punch when our income disappeared and we thought, sugar, what do we do? How do we get out of this? And it took a while, 10 days or so, for me to find my feet, steady my head, and think, okay, well, how are we going to get out of it? And then 2.5 years of furiously working, very long days, early mornings, late nights, 7 days a week, constantly working to figure out and to get those multiple streams at it. Okay, so If you have the opportunity now to make small changes, I would encourage you to do that rather than waiting for that bus to hit and that pain to set in. It's not the best way to do it for sure. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk you through the five pillars to financial wellness, and we covered those on Friday's call, and they're the core to everything that I teach. Now we've covered the first one already, so just to remind you, the first pillar and the reason why it's the first pillar is to get that clear vision of what financial wellness looks like to you. There's no right or wrong on this. What There are so many different versions of it as there are individuals. It's about understanding what that means to you, what that looks like, and what your ideal day would look like. If you were to be given a blank sheet to draw, to write out what that would shape up like, then do that. Try and remove any limitations that you have, because what I often see people struggling with is they're say they would love the idea of having your rental portfolio, but they have right now, maybe they're in debt and they have absolutely no clue as to how that could potentially become a reality for you. And I could share with you the Airbnb idea I had. I visited this space when we viewed this house 3 years ago, and I knew at that time I wanted to convert it. But it took me a lot of work and a lot of persuading of various individuals to make that happen. So just because you have an idea now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen overnight. But having the idea is really, really important. How you do that is not relevant right now. It will come in time, but you plant the idea and you have a feeling as to, this is something that's really going to happen, and trust, have faith that that will pan out. And there are lots of things that I've had part of my vision, and some have absolutely bombed. I have tried lots of things that have, face planted, disaster. But you try and you try different things so that some will flourish far bigger than you ever imagined, and others just won't come at all. So the important piece is to take the time to imagine what that looks like for you, and then leave the how to the side and see what comes. Because I think this is definitely the space a lot of magic and woo sort of happens when you get the idea. Okay. So pillar two then is around creating a healthier relationship with your money. And one of the easiest ways to do this, in my opinion, is to incorporate a very simple and free practice in your life that is a game changer. When I was in my house, which I showed you at the beginning, and I really felt, you know, externally it all looked lovely, but internally that was not. It was almost like, that swan, that image of the swan. You see they're gracefully gliding along, but what you don't see is underneath, they're paddling like crazy. And that was definitely the case of that. But what changed so was everything I saw was financial desperation. When I started to educate myself a little bit around this and the simple changes I could make, one of the first things I realized was actually I had a huge amount to be grateful for. And by changing my perspective ever so slightly from where my circumstances didn't change, I was still in the same house, we still had 100% mortgages, we still had one income. But by starting to really understand all the things that I had to be grateful for, my life started to change quite significantly. So I chose bedtime just before I go to sleep to run through, just in my head, all the things I was grateful for, and very simple things: having, a warm home, safe place to sleep, having three happy, healthy children, having money to pay the mortgage, having money to pay the bills, having money to put food on the table, and living in a beautiful, beautiful place where the kids were safe and they could have outdoor space, all the time. So each time I would do that, and I wouldn't do it every night because I was so sleep deprived at the time. Often my head would hit the pillow and I was gone. But I tried to remember to do it at least 3 or 4 times a week. Now, for you to incorporate this, morning time might be a better time. I love doing nighttime because it was time when I was by myself and I had the possibility of remembering it. Morning time was chaos with three children clambering in. Could be one or two in the bed during the night, who knows? So it just morning time was chaos. So I chose nighttime because it worked for me, and I would just run through it in my head. In the beginning, I used to journal, but then I was just so tired that the journaling really was unrealistic. So I would do it at nighttime and just think it through. And that really started to make a huge difference to my experience. And whilst nothing physically changed in my life, we still everything remained the same. I started to feel much better financially. I started to think, wow, you're so lucky you live in such a beautiful house, and for all the things I mentioned. And slowly but surely, I was living that. So I started to carry myself in a different way. I started to genuinely feel, wow, we've got a great car that we drive, all those things I mentioned before. And my energy around money started to change. And I did this repeatedly, and I still do this to this day. Going to sleep, I will run through that list. And now a lot of the list is the same, but now there are definitely some new things in there. And you can start with simple things, because when we look at a lot of people, who are struggling now with the cost of living, for wondering how they're going to have the money to pay their bills, to be able to pay your bills is a massive bonus. So think about what you were grateful for and start to look at your relationship. When the best analogy I find to use with this is that of a friendship. So if you have a friend who doesn't return your calls or messages, or if you arrange to meet up, they don't turn up, or they turn up very late, then that's a friendship that's likely not to last. It's one where there isn't respect both ways. And money is the exact same. If you pay no attention to the money that's coming in, you have no idea what's going out, or very little idea, then you don't have a respectful relationship with money. So some people, when I mention the word budgeting, or I think actually a better phrase for it is taking stock. So you're taking stock of what's actually happening in your life. And we all know from when, those food programs on telly, where they're asked how much they spend on food, and they say like £500, and then they look at their bank, and it's like maybe 800 or 900, and they have had no idea. So taking stock of what's actually happening in your life is about respecting your money, and that improves your relationship with your money very significantly. And it's something I still do, because otherwise money disappears. If I don't pay attention to what's coming in and going out, then I can't keep track of it. I try not to use cash, because I can never account for it. It's much more difficult to track. So I use my debit card the vast majority of times, and then I can remember what was what. So that's a really simple way. So there are two things I mentioned in this one then, around gratitude practice and around taking stock and budgeting your money, what's coming in and going out. Pillar three is a massive one, and there's a reason it's right at the center. There's a lot to it. Annual savings or ad hoc savings. I mentioned earlier in the call about those being a huge source of stress for me. So when the car tax, insurance, or some of those type of bills would hit, our stretched budget was stretched even more, and the stress came as to how are we going to pay for this. And I hated it every time one of those used to come in the post at the time, and it was really stressing me out. So I came up with a very simple idea. I wrote all those essential ad hoc expenses down, totted them, and let's, for the sake of ease, say they came to £1,200. I divided that by 12 months, which gave me £100 a month. So I started putting away £100 every month to know in a separate account that those were taken care of. So when one of them landed next time, it took me a little while to build it up. I knew the money was there. And over time, I added lots more things in, like Christmas, birthdays, Mother's Day, Father's Day, holidays, saving for the next car, replacement tech, all those kind of things. And that is an account that still exists to this day, and one that is a huge source of, really takes stress away from me. And I know that that pot is there to cover all those eventualities. Emergency savings is something different. It's about those things that you can't provide for. You don't know what's around the corner, and you don't know when, if the cooker is going to blow up, the washing machine is going to give way, and you have money set aside. Typically, people like to have anything from 3 to 9 months, and it's about choosing how many months essential expenses would you like to put aside, so that you know that everything is covered. Okay, so that's really kind of one for you to decide. Retirement is a massive piece that I cover, and I like to keep it simple, like I do with everything. And it's about, to me, it's a very simple question about, okay, well, what provision do you currently have for your retirement? What provision would you like to have in place for your retirement? And what's the gap? If the gap is X, well, then what are things that we could potentially do to come up with ways to counteract that? And for me, when I did that, rental property was one piece. This Airbnb is another, and there are a number of other pieces. So it's about thinking it through. Yes, you can get into more detail on it, but taking your head out of the sand on it is the first step, and understanding what it is that you can do, and start to get clear again as to, with your retirement, what might your solution look like. Okay. So pillar number four then is around protection, and this is a very important one and not a huge one to put in place. Really, it's about understanding what protection do you need? If you have dependents, it's definitely something really important. And most people are either grossly overinsured or underinsured or not at all. There are very few people that actually have the adequate amount of protection for their own requirements. I would include in this pillar also things like your will and your powers of attorney, because they are super important in this space too. So to avoid that, at your passing, that emotional additional stress on your loved ones who are left behind, because they don't know your wishes financially or otherwise. So it's a really simple one to put in place. Doesn't have to cost a lot. I have a lady I work with in the Northwest, and a single will I think is about 120, 30. A mirror will is about 200. So it's not a huge expensive thing to do, but the savings in it and how you can, the difference you can make by having that in place is huge. The last pillar then is around debt, and this is a word that really can strike fear and really negative feelings to people. But to me, it has polars. Has polar ends. So the negative piece of it for me would be bad debt, and that would be around credit card debt, around any personal loans, etc. And they are types of debt that you want to get out of your life as quickly as you can. The I would put your mortgage debt in the middle, kind of as neutral debt, and then good debt I would class as your buy to let. So any kind of rental income that you have, where you have borrowed an amount of money, but the money that actually generates every month is greater than the money that it costs you. Okay. So they're very simply the five pillars. I'll just talk you through quickly now, just in the interest of time. I'll cover the five mistakes that we covered during the week. So the first one is really around giving away your power. So expecting that some of the third party, be that a partner, or be that your employer or a government agency, etc., you think that they're going to sort out your financial wellness. I think that is a very foolhardy choice to make, and it really puts your financial future in somebody else's hands. And time again, I see this, and it's not until people take that power back, and women in particular, that you start to understand, well, actually, you know what, there's a lot that I can do about this. And once you start to understand the difference that you can make, this is not rocket science. None of it is. It's often put across that it is, and you need to be very intelligent and have all sorts of your qualifications in financial advice or actuary or whatever to figure a lot of this out. You don't. You really don't. I am a financial advisor, but that was later, something I acquired later. But a lot of it is very, very simple when you get into it. So mistake number two then. So correct, make mistake number one, it's about taking 100% responsibility for this. Mistake number two is you give up with challenges. So I don't think there's nobody I have met so far that has a life without any curveballs or challenges. They are something that we encounter at various stages, and something that will continue for the rest of our lives, is my thinking on it. But if your head is in the right place and you're really dedicated to having that level of financial wellness, or any level of wellness, emotional, physical, etc., as well, then your mindset will always overcome that. You might take some time to let things settle and figure out how you can respond to whatever the circumstances are, but you will always work through whatever it is that you have been faced with. Mistake number three is around then looking at the short term and with no regard for your long term requirements. So that is something that I see time and time again happening as well. And it is really important that you have a balance between both. So I'm not in the camp of, spending everything today, and screw the future, or nor am I in the camp of live very frugally today in provision for the future, because nobody knows what's around the corner. To me, the ideal place to be is to enjoy my days, all my days, and but also providing for the future. And that's what we want to get. We want to get that right balance. Mistake number 4 is having disrespectful relationship towards money. So we talked a little bit about that in pillar number 2 and ways that you can really make a difference with that. And the last mistake is around having no diversification. So having no diversification, be it in terms of income or investments, etc., it increases your risk, it makes you more vulnerable, and it puts you in a place where you really don't want to have all your apples in one basket. So it's really needs some thought as to how you could do that. That isn't something that you solve overnight, but if you incorporate that diversification as part of your vision when you're thinking that out, then that really is something that you can flesh out as you go. And like I said before, don't worry about the how piece. Okay. So that is the kind of the synopsis of the week. If you want to go into any more detail on this, I'm conscious that we've put a lot of information into a short space of time. All the recordings are on the one page, which is the helpful links page. You have in most of the emails that I send out, the recording link is there, so you can listen back to those. They'll be available until Friday. So just, click the link and go back on the ones. The Monday we covered the kind of the background and around financial wellness. Wednesday we covered the 5 mistakes in more detail, and Friday we covered the 5 pillars. And then Tuesday and Thursday we had the Q&A calls. So listen back to any of those if there's one in particular that resonates. And the biggest thing about this, I would encourage you to do, having listened to this information today, is to pick, pick one thing that resonated most strongly with you, and what one action can you do to address that? Because this is all about baby steps. I mentioned a number of times during the week that when I look back at where I was in 2015, where I am now, there was probably one or two big things that I did in that time. But the vast majority of things that I did were tiny little things, very small things, like the gratitude, like, taking stock, like, buying a book, doing a small course, sending emails, making phone calls, talking to other people who were on similar paths, all little steps. But there were thousands and thousands of little steps that I took in that time, but none of them took huge amount of time or energy, or a lot of them didn't cost very much money either. A huge part around it was really educating myself and getting my understanding around financial literacy to a level that I could understand what it was that I needed to do, and having clarity around that vision. So the information that I've shared you is based on my own personal experience. It's not from a book. It's based on, as I look back on my journey to financial wellness, these are the key pieces that were featured in it. So I hope that was helpful. I would encourage you to pick that one thing that you're going to do, what resonated most, and what action you're going to take. I would love you to share. So press reply on any of the emails and share that with me as to what specifically resonated with you and what action you're going to take. So that will be there's nothing more than I love than hearing from you and having that interaction and hearing what actually really resonated with you. So thank you for your time this evening. Thank you for joining me. We'll have our last call tomorrow at 7 p.m. Same location. And if there's anything else that I can help you with, or any question that you'd like to ask offline, please do let me know. And you have the email address. Just press reply on any of the emails that you've received so far. So thank you again for your time. I hope you got some good stuff out of that. And I will see you tomorrow at 7 p.m. Have a lovely evening. Bye bye.